Hey, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of our FretBuzz podcast. Dave and I with you again. Tonight, we've got another crazy episode lined up. We are jumping right into no other than George Lynch of Dokken. Everybody has, so many mixed feelings about George. He came on the scene back in the 80s and was just, instantly a rock star, right? The guy could really play well. He had a great look. He had the two-tone blonde hair, and all of us were trying to emulate that. But even back in the early days, I remember a lot of folks were kind of on the fence with him as far as his playing. I always loved his playing. I never tried to compare him to Yngwie or Steve Vai or Satriani or anybody. He was just kind of that typical 80s hair guy. And I remember Steve Krakis, we were talking one day, Dave, remember that when we went up to Sweetwater, and we were talking about Lynch was kind of like always like dragging a little bit, and Steve said, well, that's because he didn't know what next note he was going to play.
Pretty much it. Yeah.
It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, he'll profess that he doesn't know what he's doing still yet,
Yeah. And back then, like, we had no idea, right? He came out years later, decades later. Hey, I really didn't know how to play. I took lessons from all these people, and we're like, what? So yeah, it's pretty crazy. But Dave, when do we think that we kind of first got, because obviously on our episode 1 we talked about playing Breaking the Chains in our
do we know what year the talent show was?
That would have been 7th grade, so that would have been like 83.
Okay, so that was fresh then. That was like, that was brand new stuff at that point.
Yeah. So we had to have, we think our buddy Tim Fierro, who was the bass player and singer in the Vengeance band.
Yeah.
Tim, if you're out there watching, man, let us know. We think you introduced us to Dokken.
Because we can't figure it out. It's like it's either him or Jay. And
yeah.
Well, comment below if you guys know. I don't know.
Yeah. And it wouldn't have been too much longer, too much previous to the talent show, because
we had to learn
because the album came out. We think the album, Don Dokken actually recorded the album over in Germany, just by himself and some rental musicians, and it wasn't very good. It was his first album too. And then once he came over to to the US, they re-recorded it with the with the rest of the lineup, and the rest is history, as they say. But so we're guessing 82, 83 is when Breaking the Chains US version dropped. So pretty crazy timing there. But yeah, so after we first, Dave and I first got introduced to George, like I said, I always loved his playing. I think I always resonated with the fact that he was just like one of those guys, like a lot of the guitar players that we like, could just write really good riffs for the time, for the era, and I just always gravitated to his his riff style writing. Obviously, his leads were decent. I mean, for back in the day, that was really hard. But for me, that was always my thing. Is the leads were cool, but I just always enjoyed the fact that they were just cool riffs and stuff. Dave, after we kind of got through some of those, Breaking the Chains here, and Tooth and Nail came out. What are your thoughts on Tooth and Nail? Because man, that was what a drop. That album was crazy. What are your thoughts?
I think a big difference in his playing style. You could tell he was trying to keep up with the Joneses there a little bit, he got a little quicker, but he still had that thing that just it sounded like him. It's like it was just instantly recognizable. Tone changed, everything changed. He was playing different guitars, playing different amps.
Yeah.
It was and the songs were good. The songs were a lot better. You could just tell that there was influence in there other than Don, even though he takes all the credit for everything.
Yeah, he does. Of course he does.
Yeah. So it's like, they had some influence,
Yeah. I think one of the things for me when Tooth and Nail came out, that album, not just the song, man, like you said, you could tell he had upgraded to some of his gear, getting into that, from what we thought, back then we didn't know how like sponsorships worked. All we saw was George Lynch on every Guitar Player magazine, and every picture of him was with Randalls.
Yep.
Right. So that was my influence getting my first Randall half stack. And, I have to believe that there's a lot of Randall on that Tooth and Nail record, because, man, those tones
it's
very
funny.
similar.
It's funny too, because, it's like I had my JCM 800 at that point, and I got all kinds of crap from you guys about it, because you got a Randall, Joey got a Randall, Liv got a Randall, and then
he did.
You guys are like, your Marshall's crap. You guys always give me shit about the Marshall, and it's like,
yeah. Well, part of that was just
completely flip flop now. You know what I mean? It's just like, Joey wouldn't touch a Randall with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah,
and it's like, and so he's got a Jubilee now, a little Marshall Jubilee half stack. So it's like, it's just funny how things change.
Yeah.
But the whole thing, we were going for gain. We wanted more gain, and it's like it didn't sound. We wanted amp gain. We didn't want to put a distortion pedal in front of it. It just didn't sound right. And
correct.
So
yeah. Well, I think we also quickly learned that that Randall, the clean channels were garbage, and they were kind of a one-trick pony, right? That Randall crunch, that's pretty much all you had, right? Yep. If you switch to a neck pickup on them, they didn't really sound great, but on those bridge pickup, rocking those 80s, riffs and rhythms, it was great, but it was pretty much a one-trick pony. And also too, the big thing with George was he was playing the part as well. Dave and all of us, we always loved these guys' guitars, because they were always homegrown paint jobs. They were always like, who painted this guitar? And we had no idea that a lot of times, Ed and, Van Halen and all these guys were doing this stuff on their own.
Yeah.
So we're going to music stores trying to feel like, and we would take these pictures like, how do I get this blood dripped guitar that has a skull on it? And at the time we're thinking, well, some factory somewhere, Kramer or somebody's making those. We had no idea that these guys were doing that stuff in their, in the back of their tour bus, or, in Iowa when they stopped for a couple of days,
Yeah, Ed, it was kind of too funny. It was like Ed did his Stripe thing. Like he did it over time, and he did it like, there's that one video where that guy went really in depth on it, where he tracked it into the month and the day, and it was raining. He said it was raining this day, so he found out when it was raining, and and did all that stuff. But it was just funny how, like, he was on tour, he got off, he decided people were copying him, so he's like, let me just change something, and then then stuck it back together and went back on tour again.
Yeah.
And Lynch was the same way. It's like Eddie had his Stripes, and then he was like, I wanted something, and that's how he came up with the Tiger thing.
Correct. Yeah. That was, that blew us away, because he went from these kind of like blood dripped, and you could tell like homegrown airbrushing looking, styles and designs. And then all of a sudden the Tiger Stripe came out, and, of course I fell in love with that. I had a Hondo, we talked about in the first episode, a Hondo Explorer style body, and, my dad helped me paint it, and we did all that, and it was pretty cool. It was my first time of doing a custom paint job, and
we tried all kinds of things. I mean, it's like the white Kramer you had back there.
Yeah,
we had like a blood drip down it at one.
Yeah. I'll take it off. I got a picture on the wall, and I'll scan it and try to clean it up a little bit, but. Same deal, Warren DeMartini, those guys were doing, blood drip things, and Frenchie, and, all that stuff. But man, what a great time for us though, because every guitar player was coming out with, and we didn't really care about, back then, we didn't really care about brand loyalty. All of us were like, hey, if this guy's got an ESP or a Kramer or whatever, we didn't care. We love those guitars.
Yeah.
And we always tried to find music stores that would carry something similar to it. And that's kind of really, back when, Dave, you and I started getting into, serious modifications on guitars, right? That's when we were like, what these guys are doing it. Why can't we?
Yep.
And we didn't know they were, these guys are in their mid 20s, and here we are 13, 14 years old with routers and
hacking stuff up,
spray guns and hacking stuff up. But we just didn't care. We always knew, hey, whatever the outcome was, we were still playing the daggone guitar. So, and we hacked up, that Focus back there, and Hondo, a bunch of Dave's guitars, and all of our friends' guitars. And anytime we had an opportunity to do it in the style of these players that we liked, we did it. And George was no exception. Everybody, we later met, Rob Liston. Hey, Lid, if you're watching. And, Rob and I were huge, George fans. And we, obviously that helped us, get to know each other and rock out together. And I'll toss up a picture of us back in the heyday with our.
You guys went all in on that.
We went two-tone, man, all in. I'm not going to lie, love to have that hair back now. But yeah, so Tooth and Nail album. I mean, that was, that obviously wasn't at their peak, but we saw them at Hera, on that tour. Seeing those guys play that stuff live and killing it. And a real quick funny story: Dave and I were front row at Hera Arena for that tour, and Don Dokken was doing some microphone stand stuff. And Dave, you remember he went to catch that mic stand and missed. He didn't catch it. It hit his hand and it hit the bodyguard guy in front of us and pretty much almost knocked him out. Don comes running over and Dave and I are just like going, what is going on? That poor security guard almost got knocked out. That's and Don's like singing. He's like, alone again. He's like, dude, I'm so sorry, man. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Yeah. He's
that's funny. Yeah, I barely remember that. That's digging deep on that.
Yeah. But that was like our go-to, right? Skipping school, we're getting out early, going to Hera, waiting in line, making sure we get to the board because we wanted that front row. And George would always, didn't disappoint live. He'd always kill those solos. He played things. The one thing that I found interesting about George, and you don't really notice that when you're younger and you're awestruck, and these guys were, they were guitar gods to us, right? They weren't human. They were literally from other planets. And, looking back on it now and you watch some of the footage you can find on YouTube, George never really played his solos the same way as in the studio. It was
not even close.
He always was ad lib about that. And obviously we know now that that's just, he wasn't like a great guitar player. And he, there's interviews of him, even mentioning, like, he's like, half the time he goes, I just forget what I played in the studio.
Yeah.
I always thought that was interesting because, a lot of other guys, like, one of our future episodes, and I can't wait to do this one on Nuno. Mm-hmm. Nuno's a beast. He still plays those solos pretty much note for note and just murders it. He's such an exceptional player. And, George wasn't really like that. He kind of, he'd flirt around with close to what he played, but not quite.
Yeah. It's one of those things where though, but it was instantly recognizable. I mean, it's like you could still know it was him. It's like that hearing aid video. Remember we watched the crap out of that 7,000 times. Out of all of the people who played in that video, I remember 2 of the solos. I remember his and Ingve's. Ingve literally just crushed everybody, but it was funny too because watching an interview with George, and he goes, we were just all trying to outplay Ingve. He goes, that's what it was. Because everybody literally there was just couldn't believe it. You know what I mean? It's like
he intimidated everybody.
He just killed everybody.
Yeah.
They were like, well, why didn't someone asked him too, why didn't Eddie go to that hearing aid? He goes, because Eddie's Eddie. He goes, he didn't want to compete basically, or be in a competition kind of thing, or where, he didn't want to get dethroned by he said he didn't want to get dethroned by the Swedish prince.
The Swedish prince.
So I think there could have been something to that. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
I wouldn't want to play before that guy or after him, I'd be like, oh yeah.
Ever.
Yeah. So I mean, there was always that stuff. And he also just, he'd always change up his gear, as far as tones every album, it was always something different. It was always, I just remember getting the album and just putting it on, what's it going to sound like this time, and listening to the tones and seeing if he's doing anything weird or any kind of new technique or anything. That kind of stuff.
His playing got better. I think for me, as you go through the records, tooth and nail, then when Under Lock and Key came out, to me, that was really interesting. Back when these records dropped, we had moved on from vinyl. So now we're into cassettes, and, we'd go down to the, what was the record store in Huber, Dave?
Spud City.
Spud City, yeah, Spud City Records in the Kmart strip there. Which, real quick side note, Dave and I have, gosh, at least 10 years of history just in that strip, right? Kmart in the arcade, Godfather's Pizza in the arcade, Pizza. Spud City Records. I mean, between those, Dave and I have way too many hours in those places. Oh, yeah. And we always knew we'd hear when the records were going to drop. We'd hear it on the radio, right? Because that's the only way we knew. Hey, this Tuesday of this date, Dokken's new release is going. So Dave and I are flying over to the record store, Spud City, and then all of a sudden here comes Under Lock and Key, and you can't listen to it. So we're like riding our bikes home, and I think by then we might have had mopeds at that point for Under Lock and Key. We haul ass back to Dave's house. We put that cassette in, and holy cow, there's Under Lock and Key. Whole new level of production. Yep. No comparison between that record and Tooth and Nail, right? You could tell the money came in. The production was crazy. The guitar tones were just immaculate, right? And
big difference.
Just huge difference on that. And then so George's playing got a lot better. On that record, probably one of my favorite solos is The Hunter. That song, The Hunter. Right. Man, he murders that solo. It's like twice as long as most of the other solos on that record. But holy crap, man, that whole record was, obviously it was the pinnacle of their career as well. But the writing was great, the riffs were great, and George was at his peak, just on fire. What was like some of the songs you liked off that record, Dave?
In My Dreams was a good one. I'm confusing some of the songs with the next album.
Yeah, Back for the Attack. But
what's the other songs?
Yeah, so Unchain the Night, The Hunter, In My Dreams, Slipping Away, Lightning Strikes was like their fast one.
Yeah,
their big video for It's Not Love, right? That was a good one.
All the hits, yeah,
all the hits, right? So Jaded Heart, Don't Lie to Me, Will the Sun Rise, and Will the Sun Rise is another good one. But It's Not Love and In My Dreams were like the big ones as far as MTV play and their success there. But man, the solo on The Hunter was it's unreal.
Yeah, he's still playing that live too.
Yeah. And a lot of the newer guitar players that are out there that are YouTuber guys, they try to copy Lynch and his style, and it's really interesting. Dave and I have talked about this a lot. How is it that a guy that isn't really known for that, that technical of a guitar player, but yet people can't copy it? It's too rigid. It's too, people play the wrong notes, even though it musically is in the right scales and all that stuff. It's just the wrong notes. And, Dave and I have seen a couple of, bands that have played these songs live, right? And tribute bands. Mm-hmm. And I forget the one, Dave, we saw just a couple of years ago.
In Middletown somewhere. Yeah,
down there in Middletown. The singer killed. Don's vocal sounded exactly like it.
Oh yeah.
Even the guitar player, he was close. And every few notes, Dave and I would kind of give like that, musically correct. It fit in the scale and it fit, but it wasn't right. George.
Yeah.
What do you think that is? Why can't guitar players copy his style?
It's kind of the same thing with Ed too. It's like there's a little bit of a swing to it. Mm-hmm. It's not as you can tell those guys didn't sit with a metronome, and play with a metronome.
Yeah.
Which 99% of the people nowadays just sit on a freaking metronome and just and just try to get things, and it's just so precise, and they're just always trying to get stuff on that grid when they're recording, and it just takes the life out of it, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
It's like some of the stuff, some of the the best stuff that we like growing up is none of that stuff was on a click. None of that stuff was overthought, or anything like that. And it was just, they just went for it. And but some of it's just the feel and just the just some of that reckless abandon. It's like you can't bottle it. It's one of those intangible things you can't.
They had I cannot remember the video. Dokken came out with a VHS kind of, I don't even know what you would call it. It wasn't like a documentary. but it basically was, back in the late 80s, all these rock bands made these stupid, videos.
Yeah, the home
video stuff. So it's footage of them on tour. It's footage of them on the tour bus. It's them just being silly and
hotel room. Yeah, hotel room.
That kind of stuff. But here's what I found really interesting about Dokkens, and none of the other bands did this. They had a mobile recording rig on the tour bus, and Jeff Pilson, who is now like plays with everybody, guy's a fantastic producer, so it makes sense now. But him and George, what they would do is they had these structures of songs, right? And this video came out before Under Lock and Key, and they were basically on the tour bus, and George would just riff, whatever that 3 or 4 chord progression was, on the lead, a couple bars of that lead. I remember going, wait a second.
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, it sounds familiar. And then all of a sudden, a whole nother version would happen. But you could tell on every one of those, he was completely making that up, real time, live. Yeah. There was no practicing. It was just like, he's going to go for it. And on that VHS tape, it's really interesting because there's quite a few times he would go for something and it was terrible. And then he would even laugh at it. And like even Jeff Pilson was just like, he would look at the camera and go, take 2, you know what I mean? Like, so it was really interesting. And I always wondered, I want to get your thoughts on this, Dave. Is it that reckless abandonment, that lack of formal music capabilities and training? Maybe that was part of that thing. Maybe, like Ace and like Ed, there's swing in there. There's like, I'm not really sure where I'm going with this, but that sounded really cool. And then guys, that try to mimic it later, they can't because it was so unstructured. There wasn't really. And George even says that he learned from Zappa and some of the other, earlier jazz-ish guys and kind of like early 60s and 70s prog rock guys. They would intentionally go up and down half steps on these scales just because, right? Just to mix it up. And George does a lot of that. So you think that's a big part of that, is that it was kind of uncontrolled chaos,
Yeah. Again, it's back to, it's you got to think George was born in like 53. So he's older. I mean, he's always been older. So when we would go see him, he was in his, pushing his 40, 30s, late 30s. And so again, that stuff was, his influences were different. The way he learned was different. The way people learn now, the way people take in music, the way that people listen to things and absorb things is completely different. And it turns out different types of things. Yeah. It's like even if again, I hate going to the old man on the hill kind of thing, yelling at cloud. But you've got these new guys, and if you listen to these new guys, like Tosin and all these guys that are doing things, that Tim Henson dude, it's all very robotic and very just, what I mean? It's not, there's no feel in it.
Correct.
It's devoid of it. So it's
it's blistering and it's perfectly accurate and perfectly correct. And to your point, it's right on the grid.
Yep. So that is what's missing, and that is something that you either, you learn as you go, or, you learn from your surroundings, or even if he was in a vacuum, or if he was in a, in a void of, influences, then, you just figure it out. It's like, it might've just organically happened. It just, there's no way to know.
Yeah. That's true. That's a good way to.
But some of you can tell a lot of those guys though were influencing each other. Cause I mean, like Warren was and George could have been swapped. You know what I mean? You could have literally swapped them and they would have done the exact same thing and it would have been fine.
Yeah.
The writing style was close. The playing style was very close. So but those are the guys that they came up around the same time and they were coming up at the same time, Dokken and Rap. So they kind of like were bouncing off each other. So, I mean, there is that, but then, when it'd be interesting to talk to the guy, we did meet him at the NAMM show.
Yeah. Oh, that was disappointing, wasn't it?
Which was an interesting thing.
I
kind of wish it didn't happen.
For those that haven't heard our story on that, a couple of years ago, I reached out to some folks that I have, done business with or just follow on Instagram, and I literally just begged people, "Do you have a spare ticket to NAMM?" And ended up getting 2 tickets. It was pretty cool. So Dave and I flew out and went and had a great time, and we met so many freaking awesome people. And a lot of guys were really cool. Not so much with George. He was.
You can just tell he didn't want to be there.
Oh, he was so mad that we stopped and asked for a picture, and I was like, you know what? I don't care. I've given your brand thousands of my dollars.
We'll have to throw that picture up too, because
I'll throw it up here.
It was funny because it's like we're the only. So okay, the quick story of it is we were in the Floyd Rose booth because he was in some other little tiny booth, Soul Tone, or the block where they make blocks out of granite. I forget what it's called, but but he was over there, he was over there in the Floyd Rose booth talking to the reps, probably asking if he could get, deals on Floyd's or something. Yeah. But so we hung back. Mm-hmm. We watched. We weren't hey, none of that. It was we waited our turn. He was done. There was nobody else in the booth.
Correct.
It was me, you, and George Lynch standing there, and he almost ran to get away from us.
He did.
And you're like, hey, and then it's like your time though. You got to do it.
So I didn't care.
Hey man, can I get a picture real quick? And then he came back. He turned around, came back. I took the picture, and I wanted to get a picture.
Correct. We were literally trying to
swap.
Grab the camera.
Yeah. So then in a split second, he's gone. He starts walking away, and you're trying to talk to him on the way. Are you playing anywhere? Are you doing anything? And it's just like, and he just walked away.
I think if we were to look close, he probably was like, he was like,
It was, and then we met people like Floyd Rose, who was the coolest dude in the world. You know what I mean? It's like
he talked to us for what? He talked to us for an hour that day.
Guitar, and we grabbed a guitar that is one of his new guitars, and we played. And he was eating a hot dog, and I'm like, dude, I don't want to bother you. He goes, no, come over here.
Yeah, sitting down next to him. He's talking about new products with us.
George wouldn't give us a second.
And here being, literally one of the coolest guys in technology, Floyd Rose himself.
The genius. Yeah. It's literally you're standing in front of genius. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
In my opinion, the Floyd Rose is like the next thing from a humbucker. You know what I mean? It's like it was the greatest invention to me next to a humbucker because it's awesome.
Yeah.
But people hate him, but whatever. But so we met George. It was not great.
Train wreck.
The other people we did meet, JJ French, and he was cool, real cool. Guy gave us guitar picks. Floyd. Who else did we meet? We met Skolnick. We met a bunch of people, all kinds of people there.
Yeah, all kinds. And a couple of them we'll talk about in some future episodes. Because we did talk to some pretty cool, stuff there. Ola England, he's the Swedish YouTuber guy. He was super cool. We got to talk to him about his guitar brand and different things, and he's also a Viking. He's 7 foot tall. I was terrified.
I'm going, hell.
I peed a little. I was like, oh my god, this guy's gonna just murder us here in the NAMM.
Big giant Viking, those guys are huge.
And we met the drummer for Meshuggah. Yeah,
got a picture of him.
That guy's a monster too. But anyway, so as George's, as the budgets got bigger on these albums, obviously, everything just sounded better. George's tone got better. He kind of went from, Randalls to Marshalls and different gear. And then he kind of went crazy. You could tell the money came in, right? And he really started getting out there and, like a lot of guys, collecting gear, and, Dave and I call it, we're all gear sluts. And he really just went off the rails. And one of the cool things that he did, though, is he worked with Randall and came up with this little preamp module system. So, for the guys out there that, 50 watt head, 100 watt head, rather than just having the one tone, his rig was, hey, I like to have different tones. So on the front of the head were like 3 slots or whatever, and each one of those was a preamp module. So you could go in and change out the different tones. His approach, as he was working with the different vendors, was, hey, I'd like to have rather than a one-trick pony like the Randall amp was, let's come up with some different tones that emulate some of the different amps.
Yeah.
And who was that brand, Dave, that they did that with? It was
Egnator.
Yeah, Egnator, but then who ended up buying it later? That was the
Synergy.
Yeah, Synergy. So, and then Synergy really took it to a whole nother level. They they opened it up with a lot of the other manufacturers.
Yeah, they got those guys involved too. It's like, you know, like Wagner's involved on the making their Soldano was involved with making theirs. So you know, it's the real thing now versus, you know, just emulations of.
Correct. Yeah, and it sounded pretty good. It was a neat little thing. Early models of that, you know, that George was involved with. Some of the heads were overheating, so they were having some issues with that, and they got that stuff fixed.
Yeah, it's all worked out now.
And they got it all worked out, and it was pretty tight. Oh, another guy we talked to at the NAMM was Dave Soldano.
Mike Soldano.
Mike Soldano. Yep. Yeah. So of the Soldano brand, like, and he talked to us, and we actually got to hear about some of the new things he was doing. And
because he just sold his company, and he was kind of happy. You could tell there was like a giant relief. You know, he was really just full of life. You know what I mean? You could tell like there was a weight off his shoulders. So he sold the company, and there's stuff he's excited, the new stuff he's working on, bringing the solo back out, and then he was making some smaller amps. And another great guy, very humble, very, you know, that guy has sat with greatness, you know, and touched greatness with his amps, you know. So it's one of those things. Did you ever see that slip, that piece of paper with all the people who bought SLOs when they first came out?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Literally a who's who. It's like every serial number, you know, it was, you know, Tim Pierce, Warren DeMartini, Eric Clapton, Jeff
Clapton,
It's just like every name you can think of was on that list.
Yeah,
that bought his amp.
That's pretty awesome. That
was cool.
He was really
George used the Soldanos for a bit too, and you know later stuff. So
yeah, Lynch Mob, all that stuff he did there, and then obviously, you know, he got picked up. You know, had his own, you know, guitar lines. You know, all of us wanted to copy those. You know, there was like the snake and the swords, and you know, more of the Bingle stripes, you know, came out, and then now, what's really crazy is for the past 4 to 5 years, he actually makes his own guitars. He's got a little spot. He's got some crazy like workshop out in the middle of the desert, and I'm trying to remember the guy. I follow this guy on Instagram. I can't remember who makes his pickups.
Arcane.
Yeah, the guy. And that's what's really funny is that's just a guy, like literally just one guy that makes these pickups. So George partnered with him. So, and then George does everything else. He, you know, which I was really surprised. I'm not 100% sure he makes the necks though. I think he
doesn't. I don't think he makes either of them. I think he gets them through ESP. And then he just gets the body, and then he gets the Dremel tool out and just dremels it and like glues things on it and stuff. But
he cuts in. He basically he drills in, or you know, sands out the Bengal tiger, you know, kind of style. Yeah, and he does that. But holy cow, he wants you know, $7,500 to $10,000.
No, he gets big money for it, but it's handmade. I mean, from an artist, though, it's like, I mean, that place, you know, has its place, but you know, he'll get the Uber fans that buy that stuff. But not me. I ain't paying that.
I can't. You know, $7,500 for me is a car for one of my kids.
Yeah, I don't ball that hard.
I'll never ball that hard.
No.
And then obviously stuff disappeared for a couple of decades because you know that style of music went out for a while. You know, George kind of, you know, messed around with a bunch of different things. You know, obviously him and Don Dokken never really got along. So there's this in and out with them, you know, playing together. George did a lot of, you know, different solo things, and then really just didn't do a whole lot. Dave and I saw him, gosh, that was probably 10 years ago. He did a workshop up at Sweetwater in Indiana. And Dave and I saw some video footage from that, and we just couldn't believe it. He was so bad.
Yeah.
His playing was absolutely terrible. You could tell he just hadn't played for probably a decade.
Yeah.
He went into this clinic, and it was, you know,
he seemed like he went in cold. You know, he didn't have anything prepared.
It was embarrassing. We felt really bad for him because you could tell everybody's just like, oof, like everybody in the, you know, because it was like a sold out thing there. You know,
yeah. I mean, once he got through that, and then, you know, he's been through, I don't know how many iterations of Lynch Mob. And then he went through getting rid of the name Lynch Mob because it was, racist or something, and whatever that was about. And then Electric Freedom Band or whatever it was called. It was just, it lasted for about a week. I can't even remember. And then he's back to Lynch Mob, and he's got some young kid singing for him again. Don't particularly care for his voice, but it fits. I mean, he can do the Oni Logan stuff and that other stuff that those other singers. He can cover it pretty good. He says he's real happy with that band, and he's gonna keep the band as far as he can with this, like another year or two, and then he's gonna retire that band. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means he's quitting or if he's just getting rid of that band. He says he wants the band to go out on a high note versus having to fire somebody, basically. I mean, the dude goes through people, man. I mean, it kind of speaks for itself when you've had 5 singers on a band. That kind of tells you that, it's not the singers at this point.
That's correct. Yeah,
he's one of our biggest influences. We love him. I wish I wouldn't have met him.
Same here. I do.
It'd have been cool.
First the bubble.
Yeah, man. We're going to cover Ace Frehley too, and I've got the same feeling about him. Met him, and I almost met him. You could say it. I was within 2 feet from him, and the guy just walked right past me. So, anyways, we'll go into that in our Ace episode. But that's going to be forthcoming. We were supposed to do that this week, but couldn't get to it. But we'll get to it. Yeah,
we got a buddy coming. Yeah. So one of the things we want to cover is, we're going to try to do this for every episode. I've got some stem files again, so I'm going to switch over and share that. We'll kind of go through some of the guitar tones. The song we got is got the stems for In My Dreams, and hopefully I can sneak this in without the YouTube police.
Yeah,
they did on the last video. I had to trim some stuff off, so we'll see how this goes. But let me share the.
I'll get the AxeFX patch done here shortly too.
Cool. All right, so here we got, you can see, guitars, 2 guitars, bass guitar, 2 big vocal things. There's basically a main vocal and a background vocal with all the gang vocals, and then drums as a single track. So here's like the beginning of the song. And you can see right there, that doesn't sound anything like Tooth and Nail, right? Those guitars sound so good. And like we talked in the last episode, what a lot of people don't realize is that's not one guitar take, right? These guys, Dave and I were talking a little before the episode started recording. There's probably, 4 or 6 guitar tracks right there. And what that is, it's one take that is getting sent to different amps, and then there's a couple of different microphones on those amps.
Yeah.
Then he'll do another pass.
Then doubled it, yeah.
Yeah, they'll do another pass with different amps, right? So that could be Bogner's, Soldanos, Randall's, whatever he was using in the studio, and together you get that crunch.
Yeah, for this album, they said he was using two Marshall heads and 2 Laney heads, and then he had 16 microphones on the cabinets.
That's crazy.
So there would have been 16 tracks.
Yeah,
that they had to blend. Yeah. And then they ran a Fostex 4-track. He ran his guitar into a 4-track and then dimed that input, ran that into the amps to get more gain, I guess, or push the amp a little harder.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. And then here's what's really interesting. So as the second guitar comes in, it's a pretty interesting effect on the second guitar. Give it a listen. So you got this like radio effect, right? So all the meat and potatoes of the tone is stripped out.
Even the lead, if you notice too, the lead was rolled off real hard. The low end is, they probably rolled it up to like 180 or something.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just take all that low end out. But in the mix, it's really interesting because you don't really notice a whole lot of what's going on there. See that little staccato guitar sounds like a really heavily distorted guitar, but when you listen to it in solo, it's not.
No.
So that's all those producer tricks, right? That's what those guys, that's why they made the big bucks, is they could take 40 guitar tracks and turn it into these, you know, 2 major stems that just sounds incredible together. Oh, Pilson's bass here, classic, you know, 80s heavier bass sound. I'm always surprised at how much distortion is on those basses, and it just really, you know, it fills out the mix really well. And then classic, you know, classic late 80s drums. This is insanity.
Wow. Sounds like Cinderella.
Yeah, exactly. And what's really funny about that is, listen to how much they're obviously using a ton of the room mics. And for those that have never seen that, obviously all the drums, individual drums, have microphones on them. But a classic trick is they'll put, you know, 4, 6, 8 mics in the very, very back of the big room that they record in. And that's how you get that really big 80s sound, is the producers mix in those other mics. And you can hear on this whole album, Mick's bass drum is never isolated. It's got all of this crazy room reverb on it. So that's pretty crazy, just, you know, hearing that all together. And then kind of one of the things I wanted to talk about is right here on this outro of the verse. Listen to this. In my dreams. Right. So George is known for those, you know, those dissonant chords, right? Classic, you know, half step down, like on the, you know, on the A string to get that dissonant tone. But listen to this other part, the second guitar. It's really interesting.
Really chorused.
It's really interesting. So another technique that I learned way later, you know, when I had a studio and was recording a bunch of bands, believe it or not, because of all the high gain on the amps, you introduce a cleaner tone just so you can understand the notes. And classic George, with all of these weird dissonant chords that he did, it gets lost on all that heavy gain. So when you put them together, you get this really, you don't really know in the full mix that it's a clean guitar, and then it really helps articulate the notes. So when you're together, you don't really notice that there's like literally a chorusy clean track of those same guitars.
Dean DeLeo does that live with his he's got like a AC30 and a Demeter preamp, and so he mixes the heavy tone with the clean to get that to where you can hear the all the notes come out.
Yeah.
Clean's just enough to just bring all the extra notes out to where you could hear them.
Gotcha. And here's what's really crazy too. So when you add in Pilson's bass, so the second time through is where this gets interesting. So when you hear this on the first pass of this, he's just rocking that low note the whole time. Listen.
Yeah.
Second time through. Okay, so when you put those together, here's what happens. And this is where Dave and I would just smash our heads against the wall when we were kids. With all of those weird notes and dissonant chords, it made it really hard for us to learn George's stuff.
Yeah.
And I did want to grab something just kind of show real quick why was that so weird. And the reason is because when you're hearing all of this in a mix and you don't have the individual notes, you get this weird dissonance with that bass note getting added in. So right, so you get that classic George thing. So as we were learning these songs when we were kids, that Pilson bass note with that dissonant George chord, you get those 3 notes together. We had no idea that that's not how George was playing it, right? Because when you hear these 3 tracks together, anybody's guess. So when you go to different bands and you see them play it, everybody's playing it wrong because nobody really knew how the heck is George playing that. And it just screwed us all up. You know, none of us had any idea what was really going on in those notes. Made it really frustrating learning George's stuff because, you know, we had no idea that there was literally, you know, 2 completely different melodies going on, and then Pilson screws it up adding his bass notes.
Well, there were a lot of stuff like that. I mean, back then there was like, you know, like when I remember when 1984 came out. Top Jimmy, where he's using that Ripley stereo guitar, and it's everything's panning back and forth, all the harmonics, and then just some of those riffs and everything. It's like you can't, like, how the heck's he doing that? You know, it's like he had a special guitar and it was stereo. You know, it's like there's all this reasoning behind this stuff and all these tricks and stuff that they did that you just you know, when you hear it in context like this, when it's separated, it makes sense.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy. So and then for anybody that hits us up and subscribes to our Patreon, we supply the AxeFX patch of George's tone, and then a Headrush patch of his tone, and then these stem files, so you can kind of jam at home, and it's pretty cool because you can really get in there and listen to these tracks and better, probably for the first time ever, really hear how he's playing the daggone songs.
Yeah, if you have an AxeFX.
Well, but even if you don't, you know, subscribe to our Patreon and
you get the stems and you can jam with them. Yeah. So I mean, on the AxeFX patch, I'm going to have 3. I'm going to have that clean tone with the chorus. I'm going to have the rhythm tone and then the lead tone.
So you'll do that like in scenes?
Yeah. There'll be 3.
Oh, nice. Yep. All right. So I'll learn how to do, I don't know how to do scenes yet on the Headrush. That came out in their latest update. So I'll work with Dave and we'll make sure that we have both of those patches have those scenes. For the guitar nerds out there that know what scenes are, you'll appreciate that. So let's go over to the solo, because the solo is just freaking hilarious. Man, it's so punched in. There are big time. That is not a single run in any way, shape, or form. So it's really interesting to hear this. So check this out. So basically every bar, they're punching him in.
Yeah.
What does that mean? It means, you know, for those that aren't familiar, you think, and as growing up, we all thought, man, George is ripping that solo start to finish, and it's one take, wash your hands, right? And that's not how that stuff worked. You know, who knows what his day was like, you know, hungover, eye on crack, whatever, you know, because all those guys were, you know, pretty lit back in the day. Oh, and you can hear the different, you know, sections punch in. Which is that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And listen to that one. Listen to the tone change difference, Dave. Can you hear that over the stream?
Yeah, that could have been a different day.
It could have, yeah, exactly. You know,
different studio. You know, you never even know.
Yeah, never even know. So listen again for everybody else. Listen to the tone difference in the sound of the guitar. So right there, completely different tones. And when you hear it in isolation, there's different effects on it. The reverb is different, but in the mix, you don't hear any of that. Isn't that crazy?
Yep.
You don't hear any of those tone differences, the effects differences. And then here comes obviously the you know, the fast lick. I mean,
that is right there. That last part.
That is so, yeah, it gets that high pitch, you know, dissonant, you know, stretch there. and that crazy, you know, just run here. Isn't that awesome? Yep. And then a lot of things you don't hear too is during the solo, hearing that guitar in the background. It's pretty cool. Just super straightforward, great tone, super gritty, right? And you know, obviously with the whole thing pulled together, just, you know, sounds absolutely incredible. And then I will do something real quick just to kind of showcase the vocals. It's pretty cool. You know, Don wasn't really known for his awesome vocals, but you know, back then he can't sing for nothing nowadays, unfortunately. But
realize too late that baby love is turned away.
So that's kind of his isolated track, and then here's some of the actual background vocals in with it.
In my dreams, it's still the same. Your love is strong.
So you can hear it's pretty cool to hear that stuff in isolation, because you know, for the geeks out there, you kind of get to hear, okay, how they're stacking the vocals. You get to hear what kind of effects are they using. And on Don's vocal, you can hear there's a slap back delay, not just verb. There's slap back delay. Check it out.
Calling your name, but you're turning away. Please don't leave.
Which is pretty cool, you know, to get insights into some of that and understand all that. You know,
I think they're trying to he had more of a softer voice, so it was probably trying to thicken it up a little to make it sound a little. But the you know, that's pre-auto tune too, folks. You know,
that's exactly right. Yeah, that didn't come out for, you know, another almost 2 decades after this. So, and that's why these took these guys a year to make a record. You know, it's like this was, you know, obviously way before streaming services. You know, the era of singles didn't exist. You know, pretty much everybody today drops singles. These bands couldn't do singles. You know, Dave mentioned this at the front of the podcast. These guys were competing all the time. These bands were stealing off each other as far as, wait a second, they sold this record and it went platinum. Well, I'm gonna start trying to write some riffs like Warren DeMartini or, you know, Jake E. Lee or whatever, right? So there's always that, you know, because there were so many of those hair bands around, everybody was kind of trying to compete against each other. So
inevitably, that's what led to the demise of the 80s was everybody trying to copy everybody, trying to be the next X, insert band name here, and the next then it just ran its course. And then people got sick of it, and then that's where grunge came in and
death to the ballads,
changed the station the overnight, dude. It was a change.
Oh, thanks, Kurt Cobain.
Yep.
But no, it's pretty interesting. You know, I always love going back to these stem tracks. You know, we grab this stuff off of the Guitar Hero video games. So I can't legally tell you how to do it, but it's pretty easy to figure out. So you can get those stem files out there. But you know, and then after, you know, obviously after all this stuff, you know, the reunions and stuff never really worked. I don't think I would ever go see him again. Don's vocals are so bad, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And when you see some of the newer footage, it's just, you know,
it's rough, man. I mean, it's just like, you know, people aren't, you know, you have people that'll say, you know, you got your armchair quarterbacks that'll say, well, you know, he can't sing anymore and stuff. Well, you know, you go tour for 20 years, you know, and sing every night, and it's like 40 years, and it's like your throat's not meant to handle that. So it's
Well, Don was also known for being a chain smoker, and he to this day he smokes. You know, so it's like, oh man, makes it really tough.
If that's your instrument, you think you want to protect it, but
there aren't too many guys. You know, I know, gosh, you know, Michael Sweet, he takes care of his voice pretty well.
But they're also tuning down the whole step.
Yeah, because they have to, right?
And, I mean, it's all that stuff is down. You know, it's like none of these guys can really do it anymore. A few guys can get close, but you know, still they're tuning down. You know, nobody's at concert pitch or
correct. Not anymore. So anyway, before we go, we do have a pretty cool announcement. Dave and I are really excited about this. We finally have our FretBuzz t-shirts available. So obviously this is in the style of, you know,
the Big Muff
pedal. It's pretty cool. Got the FretBuzz thing there, and then you can get that in a couple different colors. And then we have just the regular, FretBuzz podcast one available as well. So
another one you're working on too. So
yeah. So we're dropping a new one, and so basically, if anybody wants to give us a hand, it takes Dave and I a lot of time to pull these things together, and we do the patches, and we want to make this as entertaining and as fun for everybody else as it is for us. We absolutely love everything about these topics. Dave and I have geeked over this stuff for almost 4 decades now, and we love getting into the amps and what these guys do and all that stuff. So
we'll have guests coming on too. Usually, we try to find people that are going to be, in that vein or we're influenced by these people too. So they have the similar thing. It might be good too to bring somebody that has a different kind of a view too against it. Somebody who didn't like that person or whatever. And
that's true. Yeah, I did talk to one of my buddies this past weekend, and he wants to come on for a newer guitar player that's one of these newer acoustic style guitar players.
Yeah,
and I listened to some of this guy's stuff. It's pretty crazy. So, so what we're going to do our best again. These couple of episodes, Dave and I are kind of going down memory lane together, but we're definitely not sticking with just hair metal or any particular genre. We're going to be bouncing around like crazy, and like Dave said, even probably doing some guitar players that we may or may not even really have cared for. But we want to be very diverse and really help everybody understand, what these guys went through and how hard it was. There's no difference between the 60s and 70s and then today's guitar players. It's hard to be a famous guitar player. It's a lot of work, and carving out your sound, your style, your unique thing. It's pretty crazy that guys can still do that today after all these decades. And, Dave and I love every minute of it. It's because it's just fun for us because it keeps the guitar alive. And that's the point of all this. We just want to keep the guitar alive. And, we shed a little tear when we see these 10-year-old kids out there ripping Racer X or Ingve and they're 10. Yeah. We were still eating dirt when we were 10. So
playing with Star Wars figures and eating dirt.
It's pretty awesome. So, all right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe, ring the bell for new episodes. Drop some comments below if you like this stuff. Also, too, drop some comments on guitar players you'd want to see. Dave and I have a list, and it's very random. There's no structure, no order here. So if we see somebody, drops a name out there a couple of times, we'll get it on the next episode. We don't care. We just love talking about guitars and geek out on all the gear and stuff. So thanks for joining in, and we'll catch up with you next time. See you guys.